Dear old work platform, it's not you, it's us. Actually, it is you. Endless onboarding? Constant IT bottlenecks? We've had enough. We need a platform that just gets us. And to be honest, we've met someone new. They're called Monday.com, and it was love at first onboarding. Their beautiful dashboards, their customizable workflows got us floating on a digital cloud 9. So no hard feelings, but we're moving on. Monday.com, the first work platform you'll love to use.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with a Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
With vaccines, you have thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of parents at this point saying that exact story, and yet they're dismissed totally.
Can you tell us why we haven't been able to have that conversation about vaccines and what those might be?
It was so censored for so long. I mean, especially as social media ramped up over the last 5 years, this conversation was silenced. Some serious autism is way on the rise. You can look around, you can see how many kids have the diagnosis of autism. It's way more than when we were young. It's way more than when we were growing up.
Thank you for having this discussion and your humility to say, hey, I'm going to give the information as I see it, what my research shows. Let's talk about it.
When I did the actual research for the book, it's the most shocking thing that I've ever seen in my life.
Oldish. The art of knowing more and caring less. With your host, Randy Spelling, Brian Austin Green, and Sharna Burgess.
Welcome back, Oldish fam, to another episode. Thank you for tuning in with us. We are diving into one of the most urgent conversations of our time and a really popular one today, which is our children's health. We're going to be joined by pediatrician, author and advocate, Dr. Joel Gator Warsh. We've had him on before. He's pretty amazing. From traveling across the country with RFK Jr. to eliminate harmful additives in our food supply to writing the personal and provocative book Between a Shot and a Hard Place, out now. We are going to get into everything with him. Dr. Gator is challenging the status quo in pediatric care. We're going to talk about what he's seeing on the front lines, the truths that parents deserve to know, and the difficult but very necessary conversations around vaccines, autism, and informed decision making. So get ready for it, because this is a conversation that might just change the way you think about your child's health forever. Dr. Joel Gator Warsh, welcome back to Oldish.
Welcome back.
Thanks for having me back on.
Of course. Yeah, dude, so great. So great having you here. You were fantastic before, and we're parents. We're constantly like racking our brains trying to do what is best, but we don't, there's so much information out there.
Mm-hmm.
So to have you in giving what you have learned in your scientific side of it's invaluable.
Yeah, incredible.
It's
and of course, you have this book out now, Between a Shot and a Hard Place. And last time we had you on, we danced around the conversations of vaccine, and you have just gone and dived headfirst into that pool with sharks all around you. So how is that going for you?
I mean, surprisingly, so far, it's been okay. I think that it was a very different time a few years ago, even 1 year ago. You couldn't say the word vaccine without being censored, and that was so unfortunate. In the office, I talk about vaccines all the time. It's the number one thing people come to the office for. It's the number one thing that people want to talk to me about. But it became more and more frustrating over the last few years to not be able to discuss that in public, because I have always had questions. Parents have questions I don't have answers to. I never dove into the research very deeply myself. I mean, you're taught things in medical school and residency, but you don't really dive into the research yourself. But I felt that it was so necessary because people had these questions, and you hear all sorts of statements and very definitive things coming out of the medical establishment, and then you hear other parents or other health freedom advocates saying something totally different, and it's really hard to know what to believe. And I feel like it's really important that we have the conversation. I think it's important to start off by saying, like, I'm not against vaccines. I hate the term anti-vax, pro-vax. I think that we want the safest possible products for our kids. Nothing is fully effective or fully safe. We want to figure out where things are in the middle. And I feel like it's important to have nuanced, balanced conversations, which we could never have. And that's the one and only goal with this book. I don't tell anybody what to do. I don't tell people what to do in the office. I feel like people should be able to make their own decisions. I have people in the office that go on the regular schedule, some people that go on a slower schedule, some people don't do it. And we have discussions about the pros and the cons, and they make the best decision for them. And that's what I felt was important with the book. I feel like we need to have these conversations. People have more and more questions. We're not able to talk about it, and we have to. That's the only way we're going to have the best, safest products moving forward.
Can you tell us why we haven't been able to have that conversation, and why now people are asking more and more questions about vaccines and what those might be?
It was so censored for so long. I mean, especially as social media ramped up over the last 5 years, this conversation was silenced. You said anything about vaccines that wasn't, vaccines are the best, they're not safe and effective, it was shut down. Especially we saw that during COVID. And I think that shifted the paradigm significantly. I think a lot of people had their own reactions to vaccines. They never really thought about vaccines. And we got some when we were kids, and most people haven't gotten any since. Maybe they got a flu shot, and that was it. And you had this new vaccine rollout. You had the ability to watch this unfold in front of you as an adult. You maybe had a reaction, maybe you didn't, maybe you agreed with some of the things that were going on, maybe you didn't, but it brought that to light, I think, for people. And given the concerns around health freedom, I don't think we can go back. People got really frustrated with the safe and effective propaganda, basically, of just, do it just because we say to do it. And you can't say that something is safe unless it's been studied for a long time. You could say something like, based on the information that we have, the benefits seem to outweigh the risks in the short term. We feel like this vaccine decreases risk of hospitalization. We feel like it decreases your risk of death. So we recommend it. We feel like it outweighs the risks, but we don't know anything about long-term risks. And that would be honest. You don't know if you're going to grow a third arm in 10 years or another toe. Like, you just don't know what's going to happen in 10 years. And you couldn't. That's not reasonable. But because people heard this over and over again, I feel like they got really frustrated. And now they're like, okay, well, I don't trust what you're talking about this. Natural immunity didn't count, even though it counted for everything else. What else are you telling me that I shouldn't be trusting? Or what else are you telling me that isn't exactly accurate? And I think it opened the door to something that was already brewing. And now we're very clearly seeing the highest rates of hesitancy we've ever seen before in modern medicine. I mean, people had medicine on a pedestal before. Like, more than 70% of individuals, when they were asked, even just 5 years ago, would say that doctors were something that they respected and trusted, or healthcare. But now it's under 40%. We have the highest rates of kids without getting any vaccines. The highest rates of kids are not fully vaccinated. So the very thing that medicine's trying to prevent, they're actually creating by not having these discussions. And I think a lot of parents are like, well, I don't trust anything. I'm not even going to be a part of medicine anymore. And that's not good either. We don't want to not be able to trust the CDC or our establishments. We need to work together, and we need to figure out some middle ground there.
Gosh, I think the question, though, is how do you know what to trust and where to start? I mean, do you cover that in your book?
A little bit. I mean, it's really hard to know what to trust these days, and you want to believe that you could trust the institutions, but I think that trust is built based on what you see over time, and I think that trust was absolutely destroyed during the pandemic, and it's going to take some time to build that back. And
destroyed because of misinformation? Because I'm curious.
What destroyed the trust?
Yeah.
I think what destroyed the trust is not being honest, is not believing that you could trust individuals to make personalized decisions or having discussions. It was blanket statements, do this because we said so, not following basic scientific research in many areas about masking or about what's safe versus not safe or natural immunity. Like, these are things that they knew. And we know now for sure that like Mark Zuckerberg said it, he said that he was asked by the government to take things down that were true because it was creating hesitancy, right? It very specifically said it. And so we know that was happening. And that doesn't foster trust when you're saying, well, just take things down even though it's true, but we just want to make sure that everybody gets vaccines because that's what we feel like.
The mandatory aspect of it also eroded a lot of trust.
Oh, definitely.
Saying to people like, listen, you cannot go back to work. You cannot be around other people unless you vaccinate, unless you do that. So people felt like they were being forced into something.
People absolutely felt like they were being forced to do it. And I think that's pushed people to a place where they wonder, okay, if they were willing to do it for this, what's going to happen in the future? What happens next time? What happens with the next vaccine that I don't believe in? What if that vaccine has more side effects, but they're still forcing me to do it? Like, what happens if I feel forced to do something and I don't want to do that in the future? Maybe you agreed to get the COVID shot. Maybe you feel like you should get the COVID shot. But the point is, if you are able to be forced to do it and it's not personal choice, then, well, what's going to happen in the future? And I think that's created this huge backlash. And I think that's what's created the Maha movement, or whatever you want to call it in the first place, was this backlash to feeling forced to do things as opposed to having discussion and having choice. I think it galvanized a lot of people, changed an election. It did a lot of things that you never have thought would have happened.
Like, I know for
health wasn't political.
Because we're both in SAG, we were forced to, if we wanted to continue working, that was sort of
we could not work without it.
Could not work without it. And Sharna cried going in to get the vaccine, because
the whole way there,
just because of the hesitancy of like, what am I doing to myself? I have no idea. There's no proof.
Do we need that? Do we need to force people to? If a product is so good, people will go get it, right? You want to convince them to get it based on information and data, not force them to do it because you feel like that's what the best thing overall for everybody is. Everyone's an individual. And so I think we need information so you can make the choice that's best for you. And that, when I'm doing the book, that's the mentality that I'm taking of, here's information, take it all in. You have to decide what you feel like is best for your kid. Every kid is different, because you can sit here and be like, you know, maybe we'll get into it, but like one of the big controversies is like hepatitis B for a newborn baby. But if you have hepatitis B and you're having a baby, you may very well want to give your kid that hepatitis B vaccine. Absolutely. So it's individualized, and that's gone. I mean, people feel like it's about money. They feel like it's not about safety anymore. I hear all the time. And nothing is perfectly safe. We know that. I mean, you can take Tylenol, you could get sick. You could take any medicine and get sick or have a reaction from it. And vaccines are no different. But it doesn't seem to most parents, I feel like certainly the ones that I talk to often, that health, wellness, and safety are part of the conversation right now. It's do more, do them because we say so, and money, pharmaceuticals. That's what is pushing things forward. And nobody's pushing back to say, hey, wait a minute, are there too many? Do we really need this vaccine? Are we going to have 30 more vaccines on the schedule? Like, who is putting the brakes and policing the pharmaceutical companies, who now have more money than anything else and basically run, you know, they know how to do it. They have their tentacles in everything. They give money to politicians.
Which has, I mean, honestly, that's created so much of the distrust, because everybody knows now there's so much money involved in it.
Of course. And they're not giving money to be like altruistic. It's not like they're giving money to save orphans in some other country. They're giving it to politicians. They're giving it to medical schools. They're giving it to medical journals.
It's coercion.
It's, you know, you scratch my back, I scratch. It's not necessarily completely nefarious, but if you give a $10 million to one candidate, they're obviously going to have some favor for you in the future. Like, they know what they're doing.
Yeah, of course.
I have a question just about the mandates, and then we can move on from that. But what is the data and the science? Because what was said was you have to get these mandates because it stops the spread. And I remember people being shamed. I mean, so many news correspondents, the president, this is an epidemic of the unvaccinated. And I mean, people really got lambasted and shamed for that. Did it ever come out what the science and data was about spread?
Well, I would say, even stepping back, that one of the most difficult things in all the vaccine world, and certainly the COVID vaccine world, is you have two different worlds of information. You have this is the best vaccine ever, and it saved lives and saved trillions of dollars. And then the other world, this is the worst thing ever, and it's killing thousands of people, and it should not be on the market, and it should be pulled. And it's really hard to know sometimes which one to trust, because they both have good information and data. From the best that I've seen, I don't think they ever had solid data to show a lot of those claims. There was some data at the beginning that showed that it decreased hospitalization, and that's what they were going on. But there were a lot of claims made that don't seem to have data to back it up. And even as recently as the last couple of months, there's a lot of it's been posted about what information they actually did have, but it's hard because we don't have all the data. You know, some of it was like really hard to get out. And again, it goes back to, you get this information from the company, and they have no reason to lie, right? They have no reason to kind of cherry pick and show the best data. Yeah. So we're getting what we did get, and the messaging was so terrible, because if you have a respiratory virus, it's not going to stop you from ever getting coronavirus again. That makes no sense. Just like you can't stop the flu just because you get a flu shot. That's not how those viruses work because they mutate so frequently. So the messaging was poor from the beginning, but I think, again, it goes back to they were just trying to get people to do it without actually following the known science. And they were kind of mixing the research that they had with things that they thought were going to be more likely to get people to get it, but it backfired in the long run. And you hear people like Paul Off and other people saying now, like, oh, we wanted to do anything to make sure that people were getting the vaccines. We didn't want to create hesitancy, but I think that comes along with the fact now that now people don't trust you because you were saying things that weren't totally true or accurate based on the information. And they didn't feel like they could give people the choice. They didn't feel like they could let natural immunity count. And I heard Paul Offit talk about many things. I mean, if you don't know Paul Offit, he's a very prominent individual in the vaccine world. He's the head of the vaccine safety at Philadelphia Children's and on all the committees. And he's one of the most outspoken people. But he was even saying about natural immunity, like he was pushing back on that back then because of course it should count if you get sick. We know that you get a robust immunity, but that would cause confusion and they didn't want that. So, but then you look back and you're like, okay, but should you give someone a vaccine which has side effects just because you don't want generalized confusion? Or can you not maybe explain this stuff and hope that people will understand it and trust that they have some intelligence that they could recognize that nuance or at least work with their doctors to discuss it?
Just really quickly, because baby, I know you've got stuff that you want to get into. Why is it that when I was a kid, there were like 7 vaccine shots? And now there are 30,
28 or something before
something.
They get to school.
I mean, and that are mandatory. Why, if these vaccines were supposed to eradicate things, why do we now have more vaccines than we did before? Simple math, we should have less. Should be less vaccines than when we were younger, right? If we have gotten rid of things.
Most of the vaccines don't really get rid of diseases. They just prevent you from getting it or decrease your chance of getting it. So they're still in the world.
Isn't that the sale though? Isn't that the pitch of like, if everybody's vaccinated, then these diseases cease to exist?
Like measles. Let's pick one.
Measles is a big one now.
Yeah. So that is part of the marketing pitch, but it's not really accurate. Right? It could theoretically be accurate if every single person on the planet gets a vaccine and the disease goes away. And if you have a vaccine where even if you have it, you can't be colonized with it, you can't still spread it, which isn't true of most of the vaccines. So smallpox is the perfect example because they were able to give enough people vaccines, then we don't have it in the world anymore. Measles is possibly true of that too. Maybe if every single person in the whole world got a measles vaccine at the same time, and maybe you could eradicate it from the world, but there are still pockets of it in the world. So even if everyone in America gets it, let's say today, no vaccine's perfect. There's still measles around in the world. So you could not be able to be vaccinated. Your vaccine didn't work and you're exposed to somebody who has measles. Maybe you get measles 10, 15 years from now and your vaccine wears off. So it doesn't necessarily work perfectly. And just because you get a vaccine doesn't mean that we won't have disease, but the reality of a vaccine in general, the point of it would be to decrease your risk of getting it or getting very sick. So that's the usual point of it is you get this vaccine, if you're exposed to someone who has, let's say, measles, you're not going to get sick, you're not going to get very sick, more likely. It's not perfect. Like with the measles vaccine, if you have 2, it works 97% of the time. So that's pretty good, but not perfect.
So I've always had this concern. I've talked about this feeling of like blanket vaccination. Like we're just going to vaccinate you for the possibility of anything ever happening to keep them from happening. But it's, I look back on my life and I'm turning 52 this year. I have honestly had to fight 2 of these 7 vaccines that I ever got in my life. So now at, 28, 30, whatever the vaccine count is there a part of that is blanket vaccination of we want to keep these things, any of the possibility of these things away from you compared to dealing with something, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Instead of that, like, hey, we're just going to try and eliminate that bridge all the way, all around.
It's a great question and it's very nuanced. And this is the conversation that's not happened, right? Because you have to have a discussion about each vaccine. You have to have a discussion about the pros and cons of each vaccine. And you have to look at where we are today compared to where we are in the past and then come up with new decisions or new paradigms based on that. And it doesn't seem like that's what's happening. What we have right now is more vaccines, continually adding more to the schedule. And so what you're saying is by and large true. I mean, in some ways it's good, right? You have more vaccines, you can protect against more diseases. And if they work perfectly and you don't get a side effect, that's a good thing. Over the years, of course, we're discovering new things. And so you're going to add more. Mm-hmm. So that's one part of it. Another big part of it for sure is the Vaccine Liability Act, which was in 1986, where immunity was taken away or immunity was given to vaccine manufacturers. So basically can't sue a vaccine manufacturer anymore. So they have every incentive now to get vaccines on the market, because if you do get on the market, then they make tons of money without any ability to sue them. So there are both sides of that. But when you're talking about vaccines, I mean, there's a personal discussion and there's a public health discussion, because certainly some of the vaccines protect other people. I mean, the easiest example from what you were mentioning is polio vaccine. We haven't had polio in a long time. So you could theoretically decrease or move back polio from the schedule or move it to an older age. Obviously, if polio starts coming back, you'd probably want to give it to younger kids. But we haven't had that discussion. It's just, okay, get it at 246 and let's prevent polio. But there hasn't been a need for it in a long time. We could give everyone a smallpox vaccine, even though there's never been smallpox, right? So that just goes back to, just because you have a vaccine or you can have a vaccine doesn't mean that you need it or you want it. And right now in the modern medical world, vaccines are on a pedestal, and we do it always, right? They're on the pedestal. Yeah. We should do it. They're the best thing ever.
Right.
And there isn't a lot of discussion around the risks. And I think the big piece of what's missing on the vaccine discussion, and a lot of what I talk about in the book, is that missing piece, which we don't have that information on, the long-term risks, the complications. We're kind of told they're safe, but when the disease risk is so low, the question is, okay, even if it's a 1 in 1,000 risk of having a serious vaccine, is that necessary? Yeah. And that's an important, nuanced conversation that's not simple, that's one to be made simple by medicine, but I don't think it's that simple.
So this is why I'm incredibly grateful to have you as our pediatrician, and also it's what you do, it's part of what you do in your book. We had the measles conversation. I was like, hey, I'm getting
work management platforms. Ugh, endless onboarding, IT bottlenecks, admin requests. But what if things were different?
We found love in an open space.
Monday.com is different. No lengthy onboarding, beautiful reports in minutes, custom workflows you can build on your own, easy to use prompt-free AI. Turns out you can love a work management platform. Monday.com, the first work platform you'll love to use.
Fellas, you know Degree Cool Rush deodorant, right? Well, last year they changed the formula, and guys were mad about it. One dude even started a petition. So guess what? Degree heard us, admitted they messed up, and brought the original Cool Rush scent back exactly how it was. And it's in Walmart, Target, and other stores now for under $4. So grab some and remember why its cool, crisp, and fresh scent made it the #1 men's antiperspirant for the last decade. Degree Cool Rush is back, and it smells like victory for all of us.
Scared. We are not anti-vax, but we are open to it for when it's needed, when it's right, and we have our conversations with you. And it was that conversation of like, well, not right now, that it's not even here yet. We had a conversation that put me at ease and knowing, okay, well, if it's needed, we'll get to it, we'll handle it. What I love that you do in your book is that you go through each vaccine and you talk about the ingredients of what's in them, and then you go through later in the book, pros, cons, concerns that people have. What happens when we were going around to different doctors with Zane and we're looking for a pediatrician, the fear that people put in you when you had any conversation of how do you feel about vaccines, it's different schedules, slowing it down, it was just a blanket, you just do them. And so you get put into this space of fear of like, oh my God, I've just got to do them, where you feel like you have no choice, right? And that is so unfortunate for so many people that just want answers, that just want some information, that just want a conversation about what it could be. Is it necessary right now? What's in it? I'm hearing wild things on social media. Is it true? Like, for example, and we'll get to it, vaccines cause autism. You know what I mean? It's a big thing that goes around, and it scares the shit out of you, to be quite honest.
It does. Parents are very scared. Even people that are extraordinarily pro-vaccine are scared because they read things and they see things and you can't not see it. And it's not unreasonable to have questions. A good parent would have questions, especially if you're injecting a whole bunch of things into your healthy baby. Not having questions is the weird thing to me. Right. So I think that has to change as a mentality of medicine to be open to having these discussions and understanding the concerns that parents have. Because by and large in my office, most people do end up getting vaccines. Many of them go on some sort of slower schedule because they're a little bit more hesitant just by nature from coming to the office, but they still do them. And I think that they just want to know that we can have the conversation. I'm saying what I know and what I don't know, and that we're open to the possibility that a vaccine could cause a reaction. And if that reaction happens in my child, we're going to be open to exploring that and maybe going slower or figuring out what's going on without moving forward. And there are so many parents that have come to my office or that I hear online that their kid has a really serious reaction to what they think is a vaccine, and then that gets totally dismissed, and the doctor makes them get more or wants to kick them out of the office. And we need to have nuanced conversations about vaccines. People have reactions. Do you want that kid to have more reactions? Maybe that's the kid who has a bad reaction, who is the kid that you shouldn't get any more vaccines or should go slow, and the other kids get it. Everyone has different genetics, but if we just dismiss
DNA
a reaction,
is different for everyone. Everyone's going to have a different reaction.
Think about this: you get an antibiotic to a child. That kid, after 6 or 7 days of having maybe a virus, maybe a bacterial infection, gets a little bit of a rash after amoxicillin. You just never give them amoxicillin again because you're like, oh, they have an allergy, we should never do it again. A kid gets a vaccine and the next day has a seizure, and you're like, it might not be from the vaccines.
Yeah, I know.
And let's go get another vaccine next week. And you're like, that's such a double standard. It's like, it might not be from the vaccine. You might get a vaccine this morning, have a heart attack this afternoon, might have nothing to do with it. But if thousands of people get a vaccine in the morning, have a heart attack in the afternoon, that's good information that you should take to say, maybe we should study that. Maybe there's something to that.
Lack of conversation drives me insane. Sean and I, when Zane was born, we went and met with a few different pediatricians, and we were asking questions about everything, as you should, homeopathics and all the different options. And I remember we went into one pediatrician who looked at us and was like, "What are homeopathics?"
Oh wait, what is that?
And we were like, "Wait a minute, you're a pediatrician. Like, are you honestly trying to act like you've never heard homeopathics before? Like, give me your opinion on them, but don't treat me like I'm stupid and I have no, and you have no idea what I'm talking about. And this is all you know." Like, that was insulting. We honestly walked out of the office and we were like, this is not somebody that we can have a genuine conversation with about things, because they just had one view, and it was like, your view, I'm going to pretend like I've never even heard that view before.
It was an immediate
crazy.
No. We walked out straight away.
Yeah.
I'd love to switch into, since we're touching on it, the conversation of autism. And let's start with the fact that many people and things that you can see online are saying that vaccines have created autism in their children. I even met a woman. Her kid goes to our kid's school. She had a 3-year-old that she explained to me was autistic. And she explained to me that she had a perfectly healthy toddler, that when she took him in for his vaccines, I think it was just before his 2nd birthday, somewhere around there, she took him home, and within a few days, she never saw that toddler again. And that was the first I had ever heard of these stories. Now, I don't know what the science is on it. I hear people say it's never been proven, but what is your view on it, and how do you even speak on such a sensitive thing?
I think we have to talk about it. The reason why I think it is so important to talk about, and we have to go back a little bit and then we'll get to the question, is, well, what is going on with autism? I mean, just purely the statistics, you had something that was fairly non-existent as a diagnosis 50 to 100 years ago. You maybe had 1 in 10,000. In 2000, it was diagnosed 1 in 250 to 1 in 150. Then it dropped down to 1 in 36. Now it's 1 in 31. This last year, it's 1 in 12.5 boys in California. 1 in 12 in California, boys have the diagnosis of autism. Now, certainly some of that is that we're better at diagnosing and we're more aware of it. There's no question that's a part of it. But there's no way over 20 years you go from 1 in 150 to 1 in 12.5, and it's just better diagnosis. And anybody that says that, it's ridiculous, because you can look around, you can see how many kids have the diagnosis of autism. It's way more than when we were young. It's way more than when we were growing up. 25% to 35% of kids are nonverbal and have serious autism. Serious autism is way on the rise. So yes, I think that the more mild versions of autism, it's a spectrum. So I think that there are a lot of adults that have some or many of the symptoms of autism that were never diagnosed. They get that diagnosis later. That's absolutely true. But I think also, especially with severe autism, we have a huge rise. And so the question is, why? Right? The question is why, and we don't know. We don't know the answer. People certainly want to blame it on vaccines. I've seen kids with autism that never had a vaccine, so I don't think it could be the only reason. I think it's probably many, many reasons. I think there are many things going on. Autism's probably many things. It's kind of a catch-all diagnosis for all sorts of reasons, some of them being genetic, some of them being environmental, and so there's probably a mix of those two things. But with vaccines, you have thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of parents at this point saying that exact story, and yet they're dismissed totally. And we're told, and as a doctor, we're trained, the science is settled. That's the only thing that I ever learned, and that's what we're told over and over again. That's what you hear in the media. Science is settled. We've done the research. We know that it's not related. And so when I was going to write the book, what I thought I was going to find was a huge body of really good literature on studies that showed that vaccines don't cause autism. That's what I assumed that I find. But knowing everything that I've heard, and I certainly know about some of the other not as good studies, I thought, okay, I'll find some other research here that's going to show that maybe there's some connection to autism, or maybe there are some studies that kind of are pointing to it. And so we're so biased that we're saying that it's no connection, but maybe like we need to be a little nuanced here and look at some of the things that we have found, and maybe the research is biased because that's what we want to find, or we don't want to look into other things. When I did the actual research for the book, it's the most shocking thing that I've ever seen in my life. And this is still from someone so I have a master's in epidemiology. I've done health research before. I've done a literature review, so I have a decent idea of how to do this, and I could not find the research. I could not find the research on vaccines and autism. I was absolutely shocked. I thought I was missing something. I didn't know what I was doing wrong. Didn't make any sense. So I had to stop, had to go read some books. So I read Paul Offit's book on vaccines. I read Peter Hotez's book, he's a major vaccine individual as well. And the only things that I found in their books were the same things that I was finding in my research, which is research on MMR and research on thimerosal. Thimerosal is the mercury component of vaccines, which they took out 20 years ago. So the only research that we have really is on studies on MMR. And in those studies, for the most part, it's kids that got MMR versus didn't get MMR in the setting of getting their other vaccines. That's it.
Wow.
There are no studies on all vaccines. There are no studies on vaccinated versus unvaccinated kids. You get a whole bunch of vaccines in your first year before MMR. There are no studies on that at all that show that vaccines don't cause autism.
What about Dr. Paul?
So Paul Thomas did his study in his office, which was discredited. You believe it or you don't believe it. He showed some concerns with vaccines and autism and all conditions. So there are some things that show that maybe there's some relation. Not really good studies, but there are a few. But there's definitely no studies that show that they're not.
That's so, because I remember years ago, I remember it was Jenny McCarthy, right? And she has a son,
autistic.
I think,
that's autistic.
Is autistic. And she started talking about this. She was advocating for that. And then there was a guy named Andrew Wakefield, right? And he came out and wrote these papers. And then at one point, he was completely discredited. And ever since, every conversation that was debunked because of Andrew Wakefield being debunked. But are you saying that you haven't found science to back up the debunking of that?
No, there's some science to debunk the MMR. So the research is decent on MMR specifically, and I think that's because of that. So he was saying that, so his research was alluding to the fact that maybe there's some connection between the MMR and autism. So the research that followed was on MMR, I think, because of what he said, right? And then the second wave of concern around vaccines was on thimerosal and mercury in vaccines. So then there was research on mercury in vaccines. And
is that the only heavy metal that has ever been?
So aluminum's in it now. We can go there after.
Okay.
So the research, to me, you cannot prove it one way or another. You can't. What you certainly cannot say, at least based on my opinion, and I don't think any doctor who would look at the medicine research would say as the science is settled. It's not settled. I don't think you can say it does or it doesn't. You'd have to research it, and it hasn't been done. And that's so shocking to me because I was told over and over again, and that's all you hear, that it's so settled. And you would think there would be huge studies. They would look into the huge data sets that exist on vaccinated versus unvaccinated kids, like any of this stuff would be there, and it's not. So it doesn't make any sense. And I just thought I was wrong. And then I look at Paul Offit's book and his references on the autism section. It's split up by MMR and thimerosal, and that's it. That's what he has in his book, saying that vaccines don't cause autism. And you would think if there was more, then those individuals who are supremely thorough and super knowledgeable and really intelligent would have those if it existed to be front page news in the New York Times. But we don't have that, so it doesn't exist. So we're saying that vaccines don't cause autism because we don't have research to prove that vaccines do cause autism.
Right.
So nothing says that it does. So that's a correct statement, right? We don't have really good, robust research to say vaccines do cause autism. So you could say, well, we don't have any research that they cause autism. But you can't say that we know that vaccines don't cause autism. You have to study all the vaccines. You have to study kids that get vaccines versus not. And you could do that research, the basic research, in 10 seconds or 15 seconds or 30 seconds epidemiologically. You look at big data sets and say vaccinated versus unvaccinated, how many vaccines did they get? We don't even have that.
Wow.
Wow. This is frustrating for me because I remember around COVID, I remember having vaccines years ago, which was funny because even having these conversations was very sort of left and liberal and right. Yeah. It was very like, hippie. And now it's like, oh, you're right wing. But just even having these conversations, the argument was, but you're doing it. This is what is done. You're protecting everybody else. And there was no open-mindedness to not even autism, to even having a reaction. I know people personally. It's a terrible story that I don't even want to tell on here, but I had a client who lost a child, and she was convinced 100% that it was from a vaccine. And I hate to share that because I don't want to sway anyone. It's a very personal decision. But I've heard many, many, many stories through the years of working with people, friends, and people don't take them seriously. Yet there is a governmental website called VAERS where you can see that there are reactions, and companies do end up paying money to people a lot per year, even though they sort of have indemnity, right? But still they end up paying out.
So they don't pay, the government pays.
Oh, the government pays.
For vaccine injuries.
So you're suing the government, not the company. That's what they did.
Right. So that's because you're saying
for
that bill
creating
that got
that
put in
law
where they
in the
can't
first
be sued.
place, right?
Yeah. I don't want to get too far off topic because you brought up a couple of things there, but I think to finish off the autism discussion, it's not to say that vaccines do cause autism. The last thing that I would have wanted to be able to have to say after reading this book is this, because this puts a whole other world of crazy that's probably to come discussing this. But that is what the research shows. And the reality is the autism rates are skyrocketing, and my job as a doctor, our job should be to care about kids and to care about their health. And if something is contributing to that, we should find out about that. Not to say we should do vaccines, but maybe there's an ingredient in there. Maybe there's something to do with the schedule. Maybe there is something that we're doing. Maybe it's one of the vaccines. I don't know. Let's just say it could be related. Maybe there is something that we could figure out, say, hey, if we took that ingredient out, it wouldn't happen anymore. It would happen less. Like, wouldn't we want to know that? But when you say something categorically isn't an issue, and you have thousands and thousands of parents saying the same thing over and over again, we can't ignore that story and say that it's just has nothing to do with it. Maybe it's some part of it. Maybe it lights the fire for certain kids that have a certain genetics. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. Maybe it has nothing to do with it. But you have a rising hesitancy rate. You have a rising autism rate. The research that people need to feel confident is that kind of research. And let's just say you do the proper research. You look at kids going forward. You do unvaccinated versus vaccinated kids. You do some sort of study like that, and people are saying, oh, you can't do that because they're not ethical. You could do it. You could have people choose which group they're in if they're not going to get vaccinated. There are a lot of people that would volunteer for that study. So you could do it. You couldn't do the best study blinded, but you could at least do an open trial. And if you found that it was no relationship, that would be the research and information that parents would love to give them confidence that they're going to get a vaccine and it's not going to create autism in their kids. That's what they want. We shouldn't shy away from that research. We should do that research to either help parents to make that decision because they can feel more confident because we are showing that it's not happening, or we show that it is happening and then we say why. and we figure out what's going on and we fix it.
Right.
Like, you can't just say that a vaccine never causes a problem. We've taken vaccines off the market because they cause problems. We had an old whooping cough vaccine that caused neurologic complications. We made a better one. We had a rotavirus vaccine that caused intussusception blockages. We took it off the market. They made a better one. There's nothing pushing vaccine companies back now to make them make better products. Why would they study their products to look for autism or to look for long-term complications when they're on the schedule and you can't sue them? They have no reason to make their products better. We have to make them make their products better by making sure we get that research or making them liable or something. There's nothing pushing them back. So they just keep the same products on the market. They keep causing the same problems if they're causing problems. And nobody's policing them.
Nothing to hold them accountable.
Nothing's holding them accountable. And the people that could be are bought by them. They run the politicians, they run the medical schools, they run the medical journals, they fund all these things. So who's pushing back? They fund the news. So who's going to do the research to say that a vaccine causes a problem? Is it going to be the CDC, the head of vaccine safety at the CDC? If the head of vaccine safety at the CDC says vaccines cause autism, you think they're keeping their job?
Right.
Like,
exactly.
Who's going to push back? It has to be, we have to be real about this.
There's no one that's independent within that.
What is it that parents can do? Because even just listening to you, I'm like equally enraged and overwhelmed of like, we have 4 young kids at home. What can parents do today to protect their kids? There's no one pushing back right now other than people not vaccinating through fear. What is the movement here? How do we start a revolution with it, so to speak? How do we create change?
The movement starts with people starting to ask questions, to be open to it, to talking to doctors about it, to bringing up these questions, because I think it needs to shift that paradigm to being open to asking questions. That way doctors are going to be more open to these questions so that they're going to push for that research to happen as opposed to saying it's just done and settled. And that's why I feel like I have to talk about it, because I think we can make that change. And I think if anyone actually looked at the research, they would probably agree to. If they disagree, email me. Send me the research that you think that doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. It's not there. So I think that's how we move forward. But at least as a parent, first of all, most of these things are pretty rare. So most kids get vaccines and do just fine. I've never seen any horrible thing. I've never personally seen a kid get a vaccine and the next day have some sort of major reaction like that. People come to me, they swear by it. So I'm sure it happens. But I think that most people do okay with it. But it goes back to immune resiliency. I mean, I think we need to live as healthy as we can, and that's going to either help prevent us from getting sick from the diseases or help minimize our risk of having a reaction from a vaccine. And you can become educated and aware. So if you are more concerned, then maybe you go a little slower and you have a closer eye, or at least you're a little bit more discerning. So that way you're keeping an eye, say, oh, I got these reactions when they were 2 months. Maybe we should go a little slower because maybe my kid's the more sensitive one. If you're not even aware that a vaccine could cause a reaction, you're not going to be aware that you should maybe be the one to go slower. But at least if you're open to the idea that all these vaccines have reactions, they have documented reactions, for sure, known and unknown, then I think you could be more alert and aware to the complication. I had a patient who, they were at another office, a couple with heart issues. They got the vaccine or a vaccine when they were like 2 months old, had really fast heart rate, had to go to the hospital. It got better, and they're it's probably nothing to do with the vaccines. It was just fast heart rate. 2 months later, they got their vaccines again. They were convinced to do it. They didn't want to do more, but they did it. Same thing happened. Had to go to the hospital. Super fast heart rate. Even after that, they still were not allowed to go slower at their office. They were told, it's probably not a vaccine reaction. Nobody documented it as a vaccine reaction. If you don't do the vaccines at 6 months, we're going to kick you out. Like, if doctors continue to have that mentality, we are never going to get anywhere, because people have bad reactions to things, and you have to have some nuance there for people where even if they believe it's a reaction, you have to have some nuance to give people some agency to make those decisions, to say, look, I get it. There's a risk my kid could get measles and die. I understand. But my kid also had a bad reaction to these vaccines. I want to go slower, or I want to hold off. I get that my kid has a risk to get this disease. I don't want to take that risk right now. I want to wait till they're 3. I don't know what the right answer is, but
they've made it so black and white, though, with the mandatory side of, I mean, you can't send your kid to anywhere right now without vaccination. So there's literally no discussion of it. It's there. Yeah. If you go to them and you say, hey, I've had some bad things happen, it's like, doesn't matter. This is,
it doesn't matter for school. And that's also wrong. I mean, in some ways it's discrimination for sure. medical healthcare discrimination, but we've made it so difficult to even have the conversation that you might have had a reaction that it's like you can't even get an exemption anymore, even if it's felt that it's warranted, because you just everybody just gets in trouble and it just becomes problematic and it's kind of taken out of your hands, which that's not right. You have to have some nuance to allow for the kids that do need an exemption or did have a serious reaction to not have to have more injections. At least at that point, like, give them time. You don't just say a kid had a peanut and has a peanut allergy. Well, let's just give them more peanuts because we need to get them back to school for like, you don't give it to them anymore. You not every kid you have to do peanuts.
During
but like
COVID, when I had to get the vaccination and I had dealt with a crazy neurological thing where I was just terrified. I was like, man, if this vaccination could re-trigger what I spent 4.5 years coming out of, and to get a medical exemption was just off the table for me. Like, it wasn't even a discussion. It was
what happened 3 months later? You had a full flare up of the same thing.
I did, yeah.
You brought up something really interesting, and that's like immune health when it comes to things like this. And I don't know why it's not even something that I've thought of. Do you feel, and this leads into the stuff that you're doing with RFK, kids are more unhealthy today because of the things that are in our foods? Do you think it's somehow a part of the same unfortunate, under the same unfortunate umbrella of our kids are more unhealthy, therefore they've got less resistance to things like vaccines and their immune systems aren't handling them? Does that?
I would, yeah, I'm sure.
Maybe, right?
First of all, it's a great question that we don't have an answer to again, right? These are the questions we should be asking. Like, if you're talking about vaccines, all right, let's discuss every single kid that had a reaction. Let's study those kids. What genetics do they have? What were they doing? What were they eating? Like, could we come up with some plan to say, hey, these are the things that you could do to decrease your risk of having a reaction? Maybe there are some vitamin deficiencies. Maybe maybe there are anything. Maybe there's some certain genetics. I don't know. Where are those studies? We could be doing them. We have great research now. We have AI. We got lots of things. We could be looking into how do we minimize risk for kids. And we don't even have that kind of research. That's not controversial. Do you want more people to get vaccines? Figure out how to minimize your risk from vaccines. We can do that too. And when you're talking about immune health, I mean, it affects everything. So if you're unhealthy, if you're not eating well, your immune system's a part of you, and it's probably not going to function as well. It's going to be more likely to go haywire from a vaccine or from anything, right? I mean, why do you get an allergy? Why do these things happen? We don't know exactly. We don't know what genetics it is or what's causing it. But certainly, the more healthy you are, the lower your risk. And we're of course way less healthy than we used to be just 20 or 30 years ago. I mean, we're more healthy than we were 200 years ago, but we're going backwards in terms of our life expectancy, and we're currently increasing. Do
you know the data on autism in other countries?
In terms of what?
Like, is it rising as much as it is here in America?
It's rising almost everywhere, but we're one of the highest.
Interesting, because we talk about vaccines. Australia, I think it's like 8 vaccines that kids are supposed to have, and then the rest is your choice.
But none of it's mandatory.
None of it. I don't want to speak on that. I think maybe a couple of them are to go to school. I'm not 100% sure, but it's not like here. I think Europe is very similar.
But mandatory is different than school because still most people do it. Right? It's like 1% of people don't get any vaccines. So it's a pretty low amount. It's just in America, in certain states, you're required for school. So most places have a very similar schedule. It's not exactly the same, but it's still similar. We have the most vaccines.
Right.
That we know.
I showed it to my cousin when I was in Australia. She's like, what is this? And it's wild. But I asked that because there's also many other countries have a lot more of these ingredients that we'll get into talking about that you've been a part of. Helping eliminate from our food in this country. They are eliminated in other countries. They are illegal in other countries. There's a massive list of them. So it feels to me like, as we're speaking, it all just plays into it. It's so much about money instead of it being about us being healthy. And it's not just our kids that are unhealthy. It's everyone is unhealthy with what we're ingesting and what we're taking and the lifestyles that we're living in this country. And it's really quite terrifying.
It is. I mean, we moved away from health 50 to 100 years ago, and we focused on money and cheaper and easier. And it's nearly impossible right now to know what is good or bad for you anymore. Like, what chemical is good, what chemical is bad. Just because it's natural doesn't mean it's better. We failed because we didn't do the research in the first place. We didn't need our companies to prove something to be safe. And we have that grass that generally recognizes acceptable loophole here. So the companies just had to research their own products and say, yeah, this is safe, we'll put it on the market. And that's how it is. And in other countries, they had to prove it was safe. And so they have many, many fewer chemicals. They certainly have chemicals too. Everybody does. But in America, money has ruled for a while. And these big companies, I mean, it's, big pharma, big ag, insurance company, all these things that they have so much money and they've grown and grown over the years, and the regulation has become nearly impossible. And so they're not really focused on our health. And so hopefully over the next little bit, to the extent that I can help out, we're going to start to push back a little bit. And I think that with RFK, obviously he's a super controversial figure, but our health is going in the wrong direction. And one thing I know for sure about him is he's going to shake things up. And shake things up is something that we need. And some things are probably going to be good and some things are going to be bad. And you're going to agree with some things, you're going to disagree with some things. But the status quo and letting companies run the show doesn't work. So we need to do something different. And I know there were a lot of people that disagree with the way that he does things or the policies that they're going after. But I think ultimately we have to be guided by what's important for our health and for our kids and for their health. And I think that people that dislike MAHA or whatever you want to call it, also need to get involved and kind of push back. It's somehow became political, which it's not. Talking about kids' health is obviously what I've always done, and it just became more popular this last year. And I'm happy that it came part of politics to some degree this year, because at least it brought it out, which is good. We have to bring it back out of politics again, because kids don't know if they're liberal or Republican. It doesn't make any difference. And the best way forward is for and Callie Bean said this best, and I love when he said it. He said, the liberal places have to out MAHA. Like that's the best thing that can happen. I don't know why Republicans somehow took over health. Like, I mean, I'm Canadian, so like all this is all new to me. But it's so weird that like what was essentially something that would have been a much more liberal ideology moved over to their side. People kind of switch teams or whatever you want to call that, and that can't be the case. Like, you live in a place like California, this should be the place that's so health focused. It always was. And you don't agree with what they're doing, okay, do it better. Like, just do it better. Do something different. That's fine. But you can all work together towards moving towards something healthier, and it should not be political. And as much as people hate him, and that's fine, they can. You're not going to love every politician, but we need to get involved for our health, because otherwise it's going to be too late. And we're seeing half of kids have a chronic disease, more than half of adults have a chronic disease. And either we change what we're doing or we don't. And if we don't change what we're doing, we're just going to continue on this trajectory where everyone's going to be on multiple medications, and we're going to be pre-medicating people, and everyone's going to have diabetes. I mean, literally type 2 diabetes is called adult onset diabetes, yet kids are getting it now all the time. So you want to pretend like it's just better diagnosis. Okay, fine, you can do that. But all these autoimmune conditions are skyrocketing. Kids are getting cancer that never got cancer before. Like, the rates are skyrocketing in young people. That's not happening just because we're better at diagnosing. That's a ridiculous statement. It's a very small part of it.
Right. You've been involved with this. You've been traveling.
Impact confirmed. The Slayer has been activated.
Demonic threat level increasing.
Hold the line!
All the power of hell cowering before one man.
id Software presents Doom, The Dark Ages. Available now on Xbox Series X and S, PlayStation 5, and PC.
Rated M for mature.
In golf, precision is everything, on and off the course. PGA of America chose advanced 5G solutions from T-Mobile for Business for smooth operations and seamless transactions. Together, we enhance ticketing and concessions for better fan experiences from gate to green. This is pro-level efficiency. This is PGA of America with T-Mobile for Business. Take your business further at T-Mobile.com/now.
The country with RFK. What are some of the things that have been your biggest breakthroughs right now in removing the harmful additives in our food?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm traveling with RFK. I would say that I'm trying to get involved in the things that
Love that. Okay.
Not to say they get so, but I haven't talked to him in a long time. I would like to. I was on his podcast like in 2022, funny enough.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, before all this craziness happened.
Right, yeah.
But, and I was like, I don't think we should talk about vaccines. He was like, okay. And he was very nice. He was very nice. We talked about kids' health before kids' health was cool. But I think with the MAHA movement in general, I mean, I've tried to be involved from the pediatrics perspective, and I went to the Kellogg's rally and spoke when they were talking about food dyes, and that was before before the election, before everything, and things have really spiraled since there. And so I just tried to be involved wherever I can. I was there at the announcement when they discussed that they were going to try to remove the dyes from food in general, which is pretty cool. And a lot of companies have voluntarily agreed to do that. And I think there's going to be a lot more to come. There's been discussions about fluoride, so I think we're going to see changes with that. I think we're going to see changes with the food guidelines. I think we'll probably see the COVID vaccine removed from the schedule. That seems to be a lot of talk. So I don't know that they're going to take it off the market totally, but I think they will take it off the kid schedule, which still makes, at least to me, not a lot of sense to keep on the kid schedule. We're like the only place in the whole world that does. So everybody else has it as a risk assessment. Like if you have a high risk, if you're in a high risk category, then you do it, but they don't have it on the kid schedule. We do. Even though no one's really doing it, which again, it's a weird situation that we've gotten ourselves into, because you have a CDC recommendation to give kids as young as 6 months the COVID vaccine. It's still on our schedule, but nobody's doing it. You have like maybe 10% of people doing it. So if you have a recommendation that your major body is giving you that nobody is doing, that's a huge problem. There's a huge disconnect there, because it means that people don't trust you. And it means that they make a serious recommendation that 10% of people are doing. What happens when they make another recommendation? It's just the CDC. We don't care. And what if we need to listen to them for the next thing? That is a big problem. So either they have to make a change to follow what people believe or see, or they have to provide the information to convince people they should be doing what they're actually recommending. Either way, what's going on right now is wrong, because you shouldn't have a recommendation like that 10% of people are doing. That doesn't make any sense. So there's a disconnect there. And I think likely they'll probably decide in the next few months that they're going to move it to be more in line with the other countries, which is a risk-based assessment. But that I don't know for sure. But that just seems to be what's percolating based on the individuals that are getting chosen for the positions and their position on that vaccine.
Is there anything that scares you about what's happening right now in these movements?
Not at this point. I feel like we're seeing a lot of good, positive change. I think that there's going to be a lot of pushback on things. But I think it's going to be really interesting to see how some of these changes play out. Certainly there's going to be a lot of pushback from the companies that don't want to do it. I would say, if anything, the biggest concern overall would be what would be the reaction if further studies were done on vaccines and it comes out to show they are causing issues. If it is shown at some point that vaccines do cause or contribute significantly to autism, what that does to the vaccine program, that would be a huge concern. Because I don't think that anybody is ready for that kind of situation where, imagine they do the right kind of study and they do come out and say, look, you have a 10 times risk of getting autism if you get vaccines. Then what happens? Because then people say, I don't want to do it. And then these diseases start to come back. And then you have some of these diseases, like measles, start roaring around. And then you have new decisions. So I think that's not something that people have totally thought through of where that's going to go. But I think we have to think through it and we have to do it because, again, we want healthy kids. So the answer is not to avoid the questions. But
and like you said, maybe it's identifying the ingredient with the list of ingredients. Maybe there's something in there where they can make a better product. Or if we look at environmental load and what are we breathing in, and maybe there is some connection with environment, those same things like a heavy metal, right?
And that's where it comes back. It's not just vaccines. Maybe it has nothing to do with vaccines. But if you look into the issue, the first statement has to be autism is occurring more, right? We haven't even agreed on that yet. Because a lot of people say that it's just better diagnosis. If you can come to that conclusion, then you can say, all right, let's look into everything. Let's look into what might be the contributing factors, which is what RFK said he was going to do. He didn't necessarily say it in the best way. He said, we're going to know by September, which was a ridiculous thing to say. But that was a little hyperbolic. But I think probably what he meant is we're going to do some research on this. We're going to identify things that we feel are more likely to contribute to it. And then we're going to do some research based on that. And that's a more reasonable thing to say if you say that again, RFK, if you're listening. But I think that's what we need to do. We need to start to identify some things because it may have nothing to do with vaccines, but that doesn't matter. What matters is what is causing it. And if we can figure out those things that can decrease those symptoms for some kids, and for some kids, autism is amazing, right? Some kids have superhuman powers and they're extraordinarily brilliant and do beautifully well and don't need or want any support, that's fine. It's a spectrum. But for those kids and those families that have very severe symptoms, that severe autism that is increasing, especially for kids if they are injured by something, and they were, air quotes, acting normally before they got a vaccine or before they did whatever, and then they got injured and then they were stimming every day and unable to communicate. Like, those are the kids that we want to protect. Mm-hmm. And we won't be able to do that unless we figure out what's causing it. And I think we can. I think we can. It's environmental. It has to be. It doesn't change that much in 20 or 30 years. So it has to be environmental triggers.
Yeah.
From your perspective, what would you say is the best way to get on the same page and not make this so political? Because I think when we're having these discussions, some people see someone like RFK and they're already charged and polarized because of whether it's his backstory or what they've heard. How do we not make this political and arrive in the same place as human beings, as parents, as wanting to just be healthy?
So it's a really good question. I was on Del Bigtree's podcast last week, and he's kind of on the other side. He's on like a main player with RFK, and I told him it starts first. We have to get the most recent research and data out there. We live in a different time. So I think the first thing to do is to make sure we get some good literature reviews, good science, have individuals from all parts, pro-vax, anti-vax, in the middle, from Stanford, from Harvard, whatever. They got to get together for these big questions. Say, all right, let's put a report out. Here's what the research shows. We're not going to be biased about it. We're just going to kind of list it out and show what we do and we don't know. We need that to be done again because I don't think a lot of these things have been done in a long time. And it hasn't been done in a way that it gets out to the public because newspapers, media, they don't publish this kind of stuff. They don't talk about vaccines. It's changed a little bit, so I think they can get it out there. That's the first step. The second step is debate. Have to have public debate. People don't like what RFK says. He's going to have to get on stage and talk to people. And he's going to have to go to Harvard and Hopkins and other places and stand up in front of doctors and let them question him and debate him and throw tomatoes at him or whatever they're going to do and answer their questions and let them hear what he has to say and discuss back and forth what they do and do not know and have those discussions openly, not just with him, but with other people. And, Dell's first comment was, well, he's offered that before and they've said no. And I said, well, but he's the head of HHS now. So it's a different time. And before you could just silence him or Dell or other people. And it was like, okay, they're just silent. They're just crazy crackpot anti-vaxxers. It's different when they're leading health policy because you have a choice. The medical establishment has a choice right now. Either they engage with him and they debate what he's saying or what they're saying, or they let him and other people have the entire conversation and they can angrily, talk in Facebook chats and whatnot to themselves, but then they leave the policy to everybody else. Or they can now choose to talk to him and debate what he is saying, what others are saying, and see if there can be some sort of consensus and they can change his mind on things or they can have their minds change. I don't know. I mean, that's what debate is. But I think that's what has to happen now, and it's a different time, so I think it can happen, and I hope that it does. He needs to get on stage with Paul Offit and have a debate, and it has to be broadcast everywhere. Like, I don't know, you do it on Joe Rogan, you do it on whatever. Like, it has to be where people are going to see it. It can't be biased, and they have to get on stage and talk about these things and say, look, the science on autism is settled. No, it's not. Okay, you think it's settled? Tell me why you think it's settled. All right, well, let me tell you what the research shows, and here's why I don't think it's settled. Let them talk about it, let people listen, and then if a bunch of people are like, well, maybe the science is not actually settled, then maybe we'll go get some more science. That's not anti-science. That's what we're supposed to do. Or maybe they're going to say, no, Dr. Joel, look, here's what the research is. You missed it. You missed it all. You have no idea what we're talking about. Oh, okay, well, that's a good point. I'm not here to say I'm not here to convince people to do something. I'm here to figure out what the best thing is. And if you're going to convince me of something else based on something that I didn't find, fine, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. Totally. The point is we need to figure out what the issue is, and we need to figure out how to get our kids healthy, and we should do it together. And you do that by debating, but nobody debates right now. They just talk in their echo chambers and they talk about how the other side's so horrible. And that doesn't help anybody.
It's insane hearing you. I just keep saying yes. And it's insane that this hasn't been happening. It's really insane. You have some of the best minds in the world sit on a stage, come together and figure this out for the betterment of people and health. Why are we not doing this?
There's nothing about being
seem
right.
that hard.
Right. It's 'cause you just have to have some humility and say, I know what I know. I'm willing to discuss and debate it. Even if that discussion and debate is online, you can have time, you can whatever. But it just needs to happen between two different sides. Especially when talking about vaccines, you literally have pro-vaccine and anti-vaccine. You have words like that, which are crazy because no vaccine is perfectly safe. No vaccine is perfectly effective. So you're not anti-vaccine because you have concern about safety. That doesn't mean you're against all vaccines. You just want to make sure that the ones you're doing are safe and going to be beneficial to you.
Putting into your kids.
So if somebody wants to prove me wrong about something or anybody wrong, that's fine. Like that's what a debate is. You just have to be okay with discussing it and letting people prove you wrong. Sure, that's fine. I don't care. Everything in my book could be wrong. If you want to prove it, I'll change it. That's fine. I'm just putting out what I'm finding based on what I'm researching, what I'm trying to learn so that people can move forward. And I think we need to do that. And I think people have agendas on one side or the other. And every book on vaccines for sure has an agenda. You look at two different books, they give you completely different worlds on vaccines.
Right.
And this book is like a tennis match. It goes back and forth.
In your book?
In my book, yeah. You definitely will be like, well, that's a good point. Okay, that makes sense. Like you have to see both sides because especially with this topic, doctors work in a hospital, especially the older doctors. They saw a lot of these diseases. They saw kids die of these things. They have a very different perspective than parents. Parents don't ever see kids die of RSV or of a bad pneumonia. They just see autism and autoimmune conditions and ADHD and behavioral concerns. So both sides see a very different perspective, and doctors are like, no, you definitely don't want your kid to die of Haemophilus influenza. And a parent's like, what's Haemophilus influenza? Is that the flu? Like, it's a different world, and nobody's speaking to each other. And so doctors are like, these parents are so crazy. They're anti-vaxxers. Why would you want your kid to have measles? And the parent's like, well, everybody had measles 50 years ago, and they did fine, so I'm not super worried about measles. I'm worried about my kid getting autism from MMR.
Right.
They have to talk to each other because you can't just say that the concerns of the other side are stupid. They're not. They both are legitimate.
Yeah, agreed.
Thank you for having this discussion. I said this last time,
it's a heavy one.
For your courage to really stand up for what you believe in, what you see, and your humility to say, hey, I'm going to give the information as I see it, what my research shows, and it could be off because there could be some, prove me wrong, show me, let's talk about it. So thank you for having the courage to talk about it and doing what you're doing.
And thank you for this book that gives information to parents and to people that don't otherwise have another way to get it, that go to their doctor and the doctor shuts them down and says, get it or you're out. Thank you for writing something where people can at least do some of their own research and get both sides of the story and feel like they're a bit more informed, because that is something that we all want as parents, to feel like we have some information where we can make good decisions and like we have some sort of control over what's happening with our kids.
Thank you.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
We have 3 questions that we ask everyone that comes into Oldish now.
We're going to lighten the mood a little.
Since the last time you were here. We're going to, and you get to answer those questions too.
Yeah.
They're not really rapid fire. Don't feel like you have to be quick.
No, they're more oldish questions. So what is something you used to care deeply about and now you're grateful that you no longer do?
I think just like stress about the little things, like, school, like tests, all that kind of stuff. Like, I used to be so stressed about all those things. And now I think you get a better perspective as a parent on like what's really important.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Yeah.
You're dealing with public health and safety. You're like, that school decision.
Or just all the doctors like pitchforking around me. Dr. Joel. Sure.
So, Dr. Gator, what is one messy human moment that taught you a lot?
Messy human moment that taught me a lot. I think just being having kids and not being able to sleep. I think that you don't realize how much sleep is important to you and until you don't have it. I mean, as a doctor, you don't sleep, but like it's consistent when you have a child, and it's so messy when you're like in that first month or two, especially if you have more than one child and then the other ones wake up sometimes and you're super tired and you're getting angry at your spouse even though they didn't do anything. And I think that's like a really important to kind of step back and just remember that it's a normal part of being a parent, but yeah, it's messy.
Yeah.
It's messy for sure. And last, what would you tell your younger self now that you know more and you care less?
I would tell myself not to be as concerned about speaking all the things that I want to talk about. I think for so long, for me, it's being in kids' health, being in integrative medicine, walking a tightrope has always been difficult. And we talked about it a little bit, but like censorship has been crazy. And ever since I just decided to just talk, it's a lot more fun, a lot more enjoyable. It's a lot more freeing. And I think that resonates better with people because, I don't know, maybe to some sense they feel like you're holding back, which I was. Maybe I didn't have a choice. Maybe I did. But I think now seeing so many people speak out and so many people kind of move the conversation forward is really helpful for me to do that. And then I can look back and say, well, maybe I should have been a little bit more open. But at least I'm here now and we're doing it now.
Amazing. Well, thank you for speaking open and freely. So tell everyone where they can find your book.
Yeah, you can find me at Dr. Joel Gator on Instagram or X, or the book, is everywhere books are sold, Amazon or theshotbook.com.
Amazing. And you also have your Raising Amazing course do you have to be part of your practice to be a part of that?
No. So there's a few other things that I have. I had a parenting book that was out not so long ago, but this conversation was so important that I kind of worked really hard to get the second book out. I have a parenting community, which you can get through my Instagram or their raisingamazing.com. There's lots of parenting courses and lots of free stuff there.
Yeah, you have incredible information on that and guidance. So I do recommend anyone to go and check it out for sure. And thank you everyone for tuning in today to another episode of Oldish. Dr. Joel Gator Warsh, it was amazing having you here again. We are so grateful for you and thank you for reminding us to speak out, to ask questions, and for giving us information and for giving us this book again for people to get that information. And for you guys, if there is anything that you loved about this podcast, if there's something that Dr. Joel said that made you spark a thought or inspire you, or you feel like someone else needs to hear it, make sure you send this episode to those people. This is for everyone to listen to, whether you have kids or not. It's amazing information to have, and we would love to share it around as far as we possibly can. So thank you so much for tuning in to Oldish with us again, and we're going to see you next time.
I just wanted to take a moment to let you know that you don't have to navigate life alone. If there's something hard that you're dealing with or you're just ready for a change, then reach out to me at randyspelling.com, or you could DM me on Instagram, also at randyspelling. And if I can help you, I will. If there's a resource that I can share with you, I will also do that as well. Thanks.
At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Ranked #1 in innovation for 10 consecutive years and #2 among public universities for employability, ASU isn't just ahead of the curve, it's creating new paths to success. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online, that's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.